Okay, thanks guys for tuning in to Dia Beltran, my Wednesday night live stream. Today is a special event. As you can tell, I'm not in my bedroom. I am I am in a studio, very thanks to the Unshackled. So today's discussion is about nationalism. So I'm just going to read something that I've written ahead of time. Blair Cottrell is a major figurehead for the nationalist or alt-right community in Australia. He's one of the most popular public speakers in the country and was a popular online content creator before he was permanently banned from all the main social media networks. Blair was ahead of the curve in the international censorship of all conservative voices online. He was among the first to be deleted from Facebook, losing his Facebook page and his 150,000 followers in 2017. He's since been permanently banned from Twitter, Instagram, and even PayPal last year, despite a fair reporting agency concluding that Blair said nothing wrong. Sky News suspended one of its political commentators, Adam Giles, for interviewing Blair on live TV, and
move the microphone down.
Like this?
Yep.
Okay, no worries. And Minister for Transport Jacinta Allen removed Sky News broadcasts from public transport facilities as a result. Nowadays, most journalists will not interview Blair for fear of losing their jobs. But despite all of that censorship, even with an extremely limited social media presence, Blair still helped to rally about 500 people on St Kilda Beach in January of this year, where he publicly identified the corrupt media and government alliance as the real enemy of the working people. Sorry, guys. Blair and everybody at the rally was labelled as neo-Nazi by the media. As a result, I happen to know that firsthand. The lies spread about Blair in the media are many and would take hours to address. In reality, Blair is a self-employed carpenter and a motivational public speaker, and here he'll be engaging in a much-anticipated discussion about nationalism with first-generation Australian Kwaku. Say hello.
Hello.
Alright, so Kwaku Adjei has spent his life in Australia as an Australian. Ooh.
Yep.
His family originated from Ghana. He believes that the West is best. He was born and raised under Christian values and has come to certain epiphanies which have led him to online activism against feminism and leftist dogma. Whilst becoming an atheist, he still maintains the belief that Christianity must remain a staple in Australian culture and society. He has featured on podcasts such as White Pony Network and the TV show Family Footsteps. Kwaku is a passionate libertarian conservative and considered an Uncle Tom by some. Well done. And he has a very severe melanin condition.
You're such an idiot.
Sorry. Okay, so today's debate is not a formal one, everyone. The format is more of a discussion, and the question which I shall put forth now is, what is nationalism in Australia and who qualifies to be an Australian? So that's what you guys will be discussing. I want to thank Tim Wilms for facilitating the event.
My man, too.
Thank you very much, Tim. I appreciate it. Okay, so I will interject when I notice things. If I feel like maybe you guys have overstepped something or you've overlooked something, I will step in. But otherwise, go ahead with the discussion. I am out of the frame now.
Tim, yeah. What sort of, where do you want this?
You just talk into the mic.
Fantastic. I'll open the batting.
Open up, okay.
Yeah. So, I can't figure out this. I can't work out the microphone either, but I'm grateful that, first I want to shout out Blair for turning up. He's the main man, let's be serious. He's got the profile, he's got more to lose than I do on all this sort of space. Thank Dia for having this as a format. Thank the Unshackled boys, fantastic work there. And let's get down to the topic, eh? Do you want a few words, Blair? I'll let you go.
Well, where would you like to begin?
So, with regard to nationalism, what's nationalism to you?
Well, in order to understand nationalism, we should probably begin with the word itself. nationalism, of course, is an extension of the word nation.
Mm-hmm.
And what is nation to you?
Oh, obviously, how would I describe nation? So, any organized, like any country that has sovereignty, has its own rules to govern itself. I got right to say, but I am. When people talk about nationalism these days, or the very first thing that comes to my head is, I see some sort of like white nationalist movement, or some sort of like based on, like some sort of division based on race. That's what the sort of area that you get into. I'm not trying to, verbal or politicize it, but that's just a natural inclination that you get when you hear about a nationalist group. People generally will think like a white group, because generally I don't think there's that many black nationalists or Asian nationalists. I'm not sure, we can discuss that. But generally we'd probably start off with a white group. We'd probably start off with a right-wing group. That's probably the picture that you're getting. And yeah, that's where I think that the majority of people would think. So
I think probably the reason for that is because there's not so much stigma or attention on any nationalist group from any other race except white people. There are plenty of black and various different Asian nationalist groups, and even Indian nationalist groups such as Tamil Tigers, black nationalist groups, Nation of Islam in America. I won't go through them, but there's plenty of them, but none of them draw in as much criticism and create as much controversy as white nationalist groups do. However, many of these other nationalist groups representing different races other than white people are in a lot of cases more extreme. Now, what was interesting is in the first sentence when you responded to my question was you said that a nation is any country. Do you see a difference between the words nation and country? Do they mean the same thing to you? What is nation compared to country?
yeah, probably, because a country is a body of land. By lifting this up.
Speak into the microphone.
Okay, so a country, I'd say, is a landmass, or yeah, that's just for at the basic level you say it's that. But a nation probably governs your nationality, because that's the extension of the word. So who is from this nation? So it's probably talking about people, I'm guessing. I'm not
Very good.
I'm not
You're on the right track. So country is a, you've stated correctly, is a landmass or a geographical area, an area on the earth. And nation refers to people. Problem though is it does not refer to people inhabiting a specific landmass. Nation has always meant, until recent times we're currently living in, where the terms nation and country have been confused. The lines between these two words are blurred with definitive lines. However, already when you use the word nation instead of country, for example, if somebody says I love my country, no one has any problems. But if someone says I love my nation, it almost has slightly more bite to it. This is because nation not only means people, but a specific type of people, a subgroup. To go a step further, nation means race. Country is a geographical area and nation is race, a specific type of people. This is why. This is what it has meant for the thousands of years hitherto. It's only now, as I said, in the modern era, we don't understand the difference between the two. But for example, for hundreds of years before Israel was re-established, various European leaders, such as Napoleon Bonaparte of the French Empire, referred to the Jewish nation, even though there was no Israel. He was referring to the Jewish people, or, to be more literal, the Jewish race. That's what they are. They're a people exclusive to themselves, in themselves. And the problem with putting nation or sort of degrading or debasing the meaning of the word nation to just the people residing in a specific area, this would mean that your nation is interchangeable and changes when you move to a different area. Would you agree with that?
You put a lot of words there. I'm trying to. I can't. Yeah. There's a lot to unpack there for me to say. Do I agree with it?
Well,
I don't know. I agree with it.
What I mean simply is, when you, for example, if I was to go to your home country, which is I'm sorry,
Australia, but we'll continue.
well, where your family's
Well,
from?
where my going? Why I'm black?
Yeah.
I'm black because my ancestors are from Ghana, which is West Africa. Ghana.
Ghana.
Yeah.
And to be a member of that nation, you would say Ghanese.
Ghanaian.
Ghanaian. Okay.
Yeah.
So is South America.
No, that's a different country. Yeah.
So one more time,
Ghanaian is in West Africa.
Ghanaian.
There's a country called Guyana, which we'll sometimes get it mixed up, which is Guyanese, which is in South America. But yeah. So Ghana is West Africa.
Ghana and Guyana.
So Ghanaian.
Yeah. So if, for example, if I had a beautiful white wife and we moved to Ghana, and we had a child there, would that child be Ghanaian? Ghanaian?
It's tricky.
Correct,
I actually looked this up recently, so not as part of this, but I was looking up to how you become a Ghanaian citizen. It's actually quite difficult to become a Ghanaian citizen. But
there again, we're talking, when we're talking about citizenship, we're talking about paperwork.
Yep.
But
so you're trying to say if your child was born in Ghana to two non-Ghanaian white people,
yes,
would they then somehow become Ghanaian? Of course they wouldn't. That doesn't just naturally, it's not conveyed upon by birth.
Exactly. Okay. So why is it different in this country?
Why is it different? Because obviously, if we talk about who was here first, talk about the Aboriginals. So it's been different for a long time, and it's probably as a matter of hegemony. So like the ruling class or the ruling group of people.
Would you say that Aboriginals are Australian?
Fuck, yeah, of course I would.
There was no Australia before the arrival of the First Fleet. Well, it's actually after. Australia was officially federated and named Australia in 1901. So how could Aboriginals be Australian?
I think we're playing a semantic game.
Well,
I won't agree with you on this. It doesn't mean that what you're saying is wrong, but to suggest that the people who have lived on this land for thousands of years, what was it, 50,000, and are the indigenous population here aren't Australian. I won't ever agree with that.
I would ask them why would they want to be Australian? Why would they want to associate or identify with the group that's responsible for apparently colonising and taking over their landmass? Why would they identify with that same group? Why wouldn't they identify with their own kind?
Okay, so
that's why I think it's
in this space. I'll tell you. No. So in this space, I'm very respectful of Aboriginal people, so I don't think that society at large puts the respect on the Aboriginal name that we need to. So they're here first. So if we talk about any sort of argument about European people taking back their land or something, I was thinking about this whole nationalism thing. If we talk about a lot of the white nationalist stuff is talking about it runs concurrent with, say, people saying they're sick of Sweden having Arabs there because they had a few problematic situations there and all that sort of stuff. So if you talk about the indigenous people of white lands claiming to their lands, then you have to then include, just to be consistent, that Aboriginals were here first. This was their land. Their land was taken from them in a very coercive way, well, let's say. And they've had some horrific things done to them, but we're not. It's not all apologise to the Aboriginals about everything. They're very. They had their own culture, so you can't then sort of just dismiss them. I think you're being quite dismissive of them if you say Australia started in the 1901 or whichever period you were talking about the Federation date. I don't know that.
Would you say that Australian culture is different from Aboriginal culture?
I'd say that when you think of Australian culture, as in the term Australian culture, you don't instinctively think of Aboriginal culture. No, that's not what it is. That doesn't mean that Aboriginal culture is not Australian culture. Of course not. Because where are the Aboriginal people going to be then? If they're not from here, where are they from?
They consider themselves First Nations.
First Nations people. Well, that's a start. They've rejected the term Australian, which is a start for them. I would recommend that they do that if they really wanted to identify as an exclusive group.
If they're not like, first of all, if we talk about the term Aboriginal means the first people of any land. So you have Canadian Aboriginals who are native to there. American Indians would be the Aboriginal population of there. So we're kind of being, it's a semantic game if we want to start talking about that. But let's get back to it. We'll talk about I did introduce the term. We'll talk about the Australian Aboriginal people and Torres Strait Islander people. Where do they fit in your sense? That's a question I'll put to you.
Well, I don't really give them much thought, to be honest. Their affairs are their own, and my interests are with my own people.
No, but where do they fit in? Or you just haven't really...
As I said, I haven't given them much thought. I can see that the current state and the various institutions loyal and connected to it are making an effort to are making various efforts to include them at every level. And every state government building, local or otherwise, I see Aboriginal flags flying. I see the traditional Aboriginal name for whatever area I'm in is plastered and advertised as I pass through that area. However,
I'm not trying to be cheeky, I'm just putting it to you.
Well,
dismissive of Aboriginal culture.
Well, I don't really understand its value. You see, I think that Australia is the result of European colonials, and I think the culture that came along with that colonialism is an extension of those people themselves. I think that Australian culture was born after the colonisation. Australian culture is the plumbing, the clean water, the education, the medicine, the timber-framed houses with pitched roofs that are all individually plumbed. And none of this existed before the arrival of the colonialists, and so I would argue that the colonisation of Australia has been nothing but positive, even for the Aboriginal people now living here. They're living in probably a superior standard of living to anything they would have experienced before the arrival of the colonials.
Not really. Okay, so where I would say, if you make an objective view that it's a superior standard of living, you talk about, from what I understand, Aboriginal lifestyle where there was like a bit of hunting, there was a lot of tribal stuff. They were probably happy, and there's, just because it's not mad modern technology and it's not this a sense to line up with Western values, does not.
If they drink or not. But I can't take responsibility for Aboriginals getting drunk. But what I can say is, yeah, there was some hunting, there was some face painting, there was some cave dwelling, there was also a great deal of rape and violence. There were over 151 different languages spoken amongst the Aboriginal tribes, and they were constantly at war with each other. In fact, they were so divided in themselves they couldn't possibly form any sort of united resistance against the colonials or even conceive of it. Any that did resist were, of course, quickly cut down by British gunfire. And, unfortunately for the Aboriginals, they hadn't yet discovered guns. Apparently we're all equal, but apparently you need to be European to have discovered guns by that stage.
I'm not qualified enough to really examine those comments you made, so I'm going to leave the Aboriginal part. What I want to get back is, so today I was actually doing a bit of, just to get my head going, doing a bit of homework on stuff. So we had the Europeans turn up, we then had a whole bunch of Chinese people turn up. And then we had a few nationalist movements actually occur back then.
Still having a lot of Chinese people show up.
I don't mind chickens, but okay. And then you had the advent of the formation of the White Australia policy. So a lot of people, a lot of the European-based people couldn't compete with the wealthy landowners who were importing. Yeah, so they couldn't compete with the wealthy landowners who were importing, I think it was Pacific Islander workers and Chinese workers, and was undercutting the wages. So that sort of sowed the seeds for some revolts or some words like protests amongst the people.
About the Eureka Stockade.
Similar. So this was all taken from like historical pages on the White Australia policy and what started.
There was never a specific revolt against the policy itself.
There's like 5 or so revolts, not against the White Australia policy. I'm talking about what was seen as causing the White Australia policy to start. So at that time, what I wanted to be very clear on was apparently there was like tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of Chinese people here. So when you talk about Europeans building the nation, you leave out large non-European migrants, do you not?
Not necessarily. I couldn't say because I don't know the amount of people who arrived here, yet I do know that overwhelmingly the majority of the people that came to Australia and conceived of Australia and sacrificed themselves to build Australia and form the first Australian communities despite the terrible conditions were European.
Yeah, but what I'm putting to you is there were very significant, huge blocks of definitely Chinese. That's what I've read, and they seem to have the.
I can't say, but I know that for instance that the White Australia policy was actually called the Immigration Restriction Act, and it was the first piece of legislation passed in the Australian Federal Parliament in 1901. And the politician passing or introducing the legislation, it was unanimously accepted. Actually, the only objection to the piece of legislation itself wasn't that it was racist. The word racist didn't exist in this year. It was that it would not be enough to keep out exploitative peoples from foreign lands, but specifically the act was made against the Chinese or to prevent Chinese from exploiting new land development.
So it seemed a very anti-China thing from what I saw. What I want to get at
anti-China, it's just, well, Chinese people are very intelligent people. They actually statistically have a higher IQ than European people, slightly. But intelligence on its own only generally serves oneself and one's own interests unless it's wedded with some sort of community or idealism. And Australia doesn't have an unlimited living space, and already you can see right now the result of no racial or restriction acts on any type of immigration. Greedy developers expand rapidly throughout the inner suburbs and away from the edges of the coast of Australia. Tens and thousands, even hundreds of thousands of cheap new homes are being built. And the immigrants, because Australian birth rates are so low as a result of the cultural crisis.
When you say Australian birth rates, you mean specifically... So when you... Okay, I want to clarify this, because this is something that is coming up a couple of times. When you say Australian, what do you specifically mean? Because I've noticed, it's more like white Australian. Yeah, let's be serious.
Well, I believe that I don't think Australia means that generally anymore to other people. But to me, I believe that an Australian is a descendant from the people who colonised and built their country.
Your ideal... So I'm not going to take this personally, trust me, I'm not one. I'm examining what these words mean to you. So your ideal of Australia is a European standard? I'm talking like a white European, not like a Bulgarian or a Czechoslovakian.
Yeah, it's predominantly Northern European, as these were the people who were responsible for the development, the conception of, and the sacrifice was necessary to build Australia. In the same way that a Japanese person is an Asian Japanese person, and in the same way that an Indonesian person is an Indonesian person ethnically. You see, I don't think that your nation changes when you move to a new place, or even when your parents move to a new place. I think your nation is who you are ethnically and biologically. You can't. It's not an interchangeable thing, unless of course you intermarry into the nation that you want to be a part of. But even still, it's going to take several generations before the children start to appear as members of that nation. You see, culture for me does not create race, and culture does not shape race. Quite the opposite. Different races shape and create different cultures, which is why you have different cultures, because you have different races. If you can, of course, live in a culture that you weren't responsible for necessarily building, and is actually not really an extension of your own biological qualities. For example, you're living in a country that was not built by people from where your parents were from.
A lot of Ghanaians weren't here.
But as a result, you can incorporate. This is going to be interesting, and it might be an uncomfortable truth, but it's still an interesting truth. You can actually become spiritually white. You can incorporate.
It is spiritually white.
Spiritually white.
For example, you're sitting here and discussing this with me in a logical and reasonably patient, and therefore you're practicing spiritual whiteness right now. As opposed to
I can't accept that.
As opposed to
it's a white thing to debate things on.
Well, if you think about Parliament, for example, the concept of a Parliament comes from the brains of white people and from the disposition of white people. If you look in African Parliament, they can't even sit still and talk to each other positively. They're punching on in Parliament. And they only thought of Parliament because they saw white people doing it and tried to copy them.
That's bullshit. Okay, so the Westminster system, something I have a lot of time with. The British people, so they were first at this form of governments that we use right now. However, before that you had the Romans and stuff. Now these days, if you include Romans and Greeks as white?
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
Okay, because that's something which I find funny, because they have a very rich culture themselves. So even why am I putting them both together? I put them both together because at different times they've dominated each other, whatever it was. But they have very rich cultures. So when you talk about even the British Empire...
When you say rich culture, do you mean diverse culture?
No, I mean, there's... Okay, so when you talk about white, like white is just all-encompassing...
Who white?
White?
Yeah.
No, but you talk about whiteness...
there's various different...
use the term white.
Various different subgroups of white.
The one thing that I think is absolutely ridiculous is to just throw all these rich, diverse... empires into one.
It's not actually me doing that. It's
not you. But
it's actually the people currently dominating our institutions that do that. White people are being described as white people by the left. I've always actually agreed that white people are a very diverse, probably the most diverse people on the planet, and they have very distinctive and unique cultures. It depends if you go to the north, south, east, or west. They change.
If you include, say, even do you think Jewish heritage is white?
No, Jewish people are not white. They're an ethnic exclusive in themselves. And I'll admit that you can actually find Jews that.
So someone, say for example, someone like Josh Frydenberg.
Well, what I'm saying is Jewish
but
people.
He looks white as anyone else.
Well, it depends whether they've intermarried into European families or not, and some of them have to an extent, and therefore they take on some characteristics that are typical of some European nation. But in themselves, Jewish people are exclusive from European nations, and they are proud of it. They've taken steps to remain exclusive for thousands of years.
Before this show, I was doing a bit of research, and where I thought that you're going to trip up on all this space is, I know a girl who's Ukrainian.
Sure.
She went and took a DNA ancestry thing, like I took one myself. So,
Is it 100% black?
I was like 95%. Oh, he's so black! No, so her one comes up with her having something like 13% Ashkenazi Jew.
Ashkenazi Jew were the Jews that lived in Europe.
Like the original one, yeah, but she's Ukrainian, so that makes sense. Yeah. Now, you tell me, I think that if we talk about modern white nationalists today, you're going to have a situation where a lot of these people are going to go split in the ancestry DNA stuff and find out they're Jewish. Now, if you're telling them, and these are people, you know, Blair Cottrell, #1 fan, UPF, all this sort of stuff, they rep it hard and they don't actually realise they're Jewish, that's going to be problematic if one day they spit in a tube, wait 6 weeks, get all their DNA stuff back and it tells them that they're half Jewish or quarter Jewish or something. I think that's going to be problematic for them. Now, I would say, as technology happens through this, you do allow for a situation where even yourself could probably Ashkenazi Jew. I'm not, don't sit here and get all offended on me or anything. What I'm saying is, once you do your DNA test, you'll probably find things about yourself, or I'm not sure what your ancestry is, to be fair. I'm guessing it's some sort of either German, British,
English, Irish, German.
Yeah.
Which are distinct in themselves to a degree. The Anglo-Saxon English and the Germans are related.
Yep.
The Irish, it depends whether they've been incorporated into the British Empire and had the Anglo-Saxon blood imposed on them.
Irish people have their own unique heritage as well.
Yeah, they do. They're very proud of it. They were dominated by the British quite ruthlessly, but they're known for their low impulse control, and I've unfortunately inherited some of that, I think. But that gets into my next point I was trying to make. That the different cultures that the different races of the world creates are almost a physical or outward expression of the capacity for creativity and understanding and the intelligence of those people themselves.
Yes.
The cultures get greater when the people themselves, when whatever people we're talking about, the people we're talking about are more or have a greater capacity for creativity and understanding. So I was actually reading something very interesting today about time preference, about how people with high time preference would take what they can get now, even if they can get more if they wait. They've got low impulse control, as if to say.
Okay.
And the reverse state of mind is to put in the work necessary in order to reap greater rewards in the future.
Okay, yep.
And this, according to the author, according to the author, was the basis of all intellect. And this could be, I think this is very much going to contribute to an advanced culture. But as I said, if you're going to change the people, then the culture will change, and it will happen gradually. Already you can see that architecture and art suffers as a result of not only immigration to this country, but I suppose what you could call indigenous people to Australia, meaning the colonists from Europe.
Yep.
These are people having no concept of who they are or where they come from as a result of subversive influence. So I think for someone like yourself living in Australia, for example, I think if you're going to remain in Australia, then your best bet is to, as I said, become a spiritually white citizen.
So when you say spiritually white, I find that that concept or that group of wording, or that way of defining what I am, funny. So it's when you say spiritually white, you're talking about what, you know, the Reclaim Australia mob, and sorry if I say this in a bantery type way, are like, they need to integrate when they come in.
No, I don't think
they need to assimilate. Is that what we're talking about?
I think you can psychologically assimilate to a degree, but you'll always be different. And so I think the best bet is to understand that the standard of living and the culture that you've chosen to live in, or your parents chose to live in, is the result of a majority white population. And if you want to continue living in that culture, then it's in your interests, in the best interests of you and any children you already have or might have in the future, to uphold or at least guarantee some sort of preservation of that culture. Because if it can't be sustained, then the country won't be sustained.
Okay,
I want to interject.
Yeah, go.
What about the point of someone who is, say, Ghanaian, but third generation Ghanaian Australian? So where are the percentages in that? Sorry, then you can continue.
Well, it depends if they've. It depends how thoroughly they've interbred, if they've interbred at all with white Australian people. You see, as I said earlier, the only way to actually physically assimilate would be to actually breed into the nation that you want to be a part of. But then we're talking about at least 5 generations before you're going to even start appearing.
See, so if I want to be Australian,
yeah,
according to you, I have to impregnate European.
If you want to be ethnically Australian, that's going to be a generational process. That's something that your children
spiritually wired.
Oh, you can. Well, as an individual, you can adopt or at least emulate a personality system, which is relative to the nation. However, you're still not of the nation. You're living in the country, but the nation's an exclusive group. They'll accept you because they're.
The thing is, when you use white, what you're doing is you're taking all the good parts of so many good generations. So you're talking about like the philosophy of the Greeks. You're talking about the governance systems of the Romans, the aqueducts, all these great things the Romans did. Then you're talking about the Westminster system of the Brits and all this sort of stuff.
Kwaku, the people want to know what you're eating.
I eat fried chicken. Because black people eat fried chicken, apparently.
It's not stereotypical at all.
No. How much on the KFC box?
It's a big piece.
That one's quite a big one.
Okay, keep going.
No, but
like my point is, I don't have any problem with you or anyone being in Australia, so long as it's not going to result in them being ethnically replaced, and that's my primary concern, and that's what motivates me in politics, is to ensure that white Australian people are not going to suffer an ethnic replacement. It seems that I'm confronted with people who want that to happen for various reasons, probably because they're.
I'm grateful that there's a couple of things I wanted out of this you to address before we started. The first one's the Aboriginal thing. We haven't actually. I think that we need to close that off later. The Jewish thing. So I was quite curious because some people don't. Some people put Jewish as white people. I'd say if I saw your average Jewish person, I'd say they're white.
Well, they'll say they're white when it's to their advantage, but then when it's not.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's elements of Australian culture? So, like, if I were to go to Ghana, I would not be seen as the typical Ghanaian person. So I'm not Ghanaian enough for Ghana. I'd guess. Yes, I'm actually pretty sure.
Well,
I'm not
you'd
Ghanaian.
probably be seen as one, but as soon as you open your mouth, they'd know you were.
Yeah. Yeah, but there's also nations where they were, for example, if you talk about South America, in say Argentina, they had it was like a white Australia policy, but it was obviously not Australia, white Argentina policy, where post-war they didn't allow black people to settle there. Argentina is a fantastic country, but next door you had the same issue where they did allow black people in Brazil. So if you look at Brazil, Colombia, and other ethnic ridiculous. Like I'd go to a nightclub and they're like, "Oh, hi, can I have photos with you?" They're all taking selfies with me. I thought it was a good thing at the start. They don't have that many black people in Argentina. Now, to that end, it's like
I just see things as they are, and then I share my perceptions of things as I see them. And that's why I've become so controversial, I think, because some things are just too objective for people to consider in this imagined world of human equality we're forced to live in. But it's the subject of South America versus North America is interesting because both of these continents were colonized by what was essentially white people. The South being the Spanish Empire and the North being, segments of the British and French empires. But why did they turn out so different?
What do you mean they turned out so different? Though?
Well, the South, the standard of living and the culture generally is superior
America
in the
has
North.
some of the most. North America has some of the worst poverty, though. Like,
It depends on where you go.
There's some mad homeless people crises in America, so it's not. Yes, there's some
But
absolute.
There's no one trying to get.
You've got this predatory nature of established countries. So America goes to Africa, for example. In Africa, I've got a book on it. I didn't finish reading it though because it was a bit. Nestle, as an example, legitimately gets rights to the drinking water of like a local tribe. And just they do not give the slightest fuzz about living conditions and all that sort of stuff. They get these contracts, so they're so predatory that I'd say they misuse their market advantage. They misuse their their relationships with the governments and the ruling organisations.
I've got an interesting story that's similar to that.
So that's why I think that the dominant, if you become established first, you're going to be better off because you can prey on the countries that aren't established. You can prey on the.
If you're talking about humanity, we all and the different races, we all started off the same. Like, so there was no one that was in the world first. But what I was going to point out first was the reason that South America is different from North America.
Oh, you go.
The reason why the people of South America seem to want to get into the United States and Canada so desperately is because if you look at things from a collective and a cultural perspective, a generational perspective, meaning if you look at things over time, the Spanish imperialists which colonised South America interbred with the natives on a large scale, whereas the British and French who colonised North America didn't. They actually either killed, went to war with them, or exclusively separated from them. Yeah. And as a result, you've got a higher standard of living in the North.
Wasn't Pocahontas about like a British person? I don't know.
It was a romantic miscegenation tale about a British soldier having a relationship with a...
Did Pocahontas end up having kids? I haven't watched it.
I
don't know.
On a boat and died on her way back from England.
From evil British colds. But also your point about what you were saying, the terrible deals and market strategy.
It's predatory behaviour by the American corporations.
Well, I had predators need prey, and sometimes people with lesser cultures make excellent prey. And this is less developed. Let's be honest. A lot of them are less developed.
Okay, yeah.
And we go to Papua New Guinea now, so I can explain my story. I had a girlfriend a couple of years ago, and her father, just stereotypically as a white upper middle class family, worked for an international oil company, and they had established themselves in Papua New Guinea. They were pumping oil out of the ground there. The problem they had though is they didn't want to do the jobs that were a little bit monotonous and repetitive, such as cooking, cleaning.
Who,
the oil company, the corporation.
Yeah.
And they noticed that there was Papua New Guinean tribes in the area, and they thought maybe we can outsource some of these jobs to these Papua New Guineans. And sure enough, they found members of these tribes who were more than willing to abandon their tribes and live in the oil processing compound for 3 hots and a cot, essentially. And the problem with this, though, was that other tribe members would get jealous because they would see the way that their former comrades were living. Yeah. And so they would climb the compound walls and murder the other tribe members or new employees of the corporation with machetes. And then the problem they were faced with was even the tribe chiefs were abandoning their tribes to go and work for the oil company just to get the food, and the beds. And so, can you turn that off, please? And so the way the oil company, my former girlfriend's father actually, you can watch this on a documentary, it's really interesting.
Okay, yeah.
He brokered a deal with the tribe chiefs and said, I don't want you climbing this compound and killing my people, because what he had to essentially do, because they had names for themselves, the tribes, and they had war against each other all the time, he had to make the oil corporation into a tribe called the Blue Shirts. And he said, when these people come into my compound, they become members of my gang, my tribe. Yeah. And so if you kill them, I'm going to have to go to war with you, and you don't want that. So he observed the traditions of the tribes, and every time a new tribe would come onto the land, they would have to pay a tribute of pigs to the other tribes. And so every month he would have to give a dozen or so pigs to the few existing tribes, and that was the tribute paid, and so they left them alone. And so I thought that was an interesting story, and it lends credence to my claim that sometimes when you're a predator, as you would describe in the international industry, sometimes the prey makes itself all too available. So.
So what that's what I'm trying to say is that in America it's developed on the backbone of other countries. So when we talk about this came up when someone said you made a comment, there was like some Jamie Goh or whatever, and he said something about Africa being full of shitholes, which is the rehashing the unintellectual rubbish that Donald Trump says. So I quickly, obviously being of African appearance, as Channel 7 would call me if I was ever in one of their stories, I took offence at this Africa's full of shitholes, because there's quite hugely wealthy countries and cities in Africa, quite developed. So, for example, I posted an image of, if you Google image search Angola, which is just one African country, it's obviously got a lot of rare earths. They're not even the top 15 wealthiest countries in Africa, Angola, but it looks very modern. So it looks just like Tokyo, like any city skyline. But people don't see this. So, but if you look at Africa, a lot of exploitation has happened in Africa. So, for example, we have the Boers in South Africa, which then came on to be they're white South Africans, basically today's white South Africans, and they went there for diamonds and all sorts of things like that. So, what was it? Something like Johannesburg is the largest city that's not built near a body of water. So they didn't.
That's originally built by white Boers. That doesn't count.
Well, what do you mean?
Johannesburg's the capital of Rhodesia, was it? Is that correct?
No, Rhodesia is Zimbabwe.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
I
so
don't know what
Joburg
geography
is South Africa, current day South Africa.
By the Dutch Boers and the English people.
So white people basically went there because of diamonds and such. And what I'm saying is, there's a weird stat which is it's the largest, and I think it's like the only city built not near a body of water. So it shows you that the intent wasn't there to go settle. It was there to get the diamonds and all that sort of stuff. But in modern day times,
white people also have the facilities to transport water, not on their heads. So you know,
you make a lot of ridiculous comments, but I get it. You've got to have flavor. But you've got to have flavor in life. We can't all be boring. So I'm actually quite appreciative that your personality comes out and this sort of stuff. But when we talk about even in Ghana, where I'm from, we had Portuguese turned up. And they took local people and took them as slaves in North America. So a lot of these empires are built on the backs of people who are less well off. So when you talk about the America right now, and there's an argument for reparations, I don't agree with reparations. I think it's a dumb concept. But the discussion about reparations is about all these wealthy white organizations profited off the backs of African slaves, right? Well, so should they then pay them back? Because modern day, say Jimmy Smith Wellington or whatever the typical white person name is, his family is quite wealthy and owns some big corporation, but old
let's say you run
Tyroneson,
yeah,
and his family aren't good.
Let's answer your question with a question. Let's say you run a business. Yeah, let's say you got a dozen employees. Yeah. Right. Let's say you make a fair bit of money, but you pay them a fair wage. You make sure they have enough money to survive. They have their own homes and their own families and so forth. Yes. But you end up making more than them because basically you run the thing. It's your life. Yep. You don't sleep. It's what you do for a living. You're a very ambitious person. Do you, at the end of your career, give all of your profits to your employees because they'd worked?
Absolutely not. But
what I'm saying is like a lot of first my example of in Papua New Guinea. It should make you think that perhaps these slaves were actually offering themselves a lot of the time in order to find an escape or perhaps live in it.
Absolutely, we're not. Let's be serious.
Well, I don't know that.
Okay,
you don't know that.
Okay. No. So I'll put you because it was well documented. So the slaves were taken from Africa. They'll either promise something.
You know the largest percentage of
weren't.
slaveholders in America? Jewish families. They actually owned the merchant ships which brought the African slaves to the shores of America.
Okay, but I'm not that smart on that sort of thing. But what I want to put to you is they were either conned or abducted and taken to work on farms in another country. So as the result of criminal, if not immoral, if not we'll just say bad behaviour or behaviour that is not fair, or what you'd say unconscionable, which is the legal term these days, unconscionable conduct. Generally, white people have benefited.
I think it's
in America. So I'm not about reparations.
I understand.
What I want to put here,
I understand fully.
I want to colour the this idea that because a nation or a state or whatever is better off or more developed, that somehow they're better because some of these is on the backs of. If they weren't
better, they wouldn't have been able to kidnap and enslave these people in the first place. But it's important to take into consideration that it's a circumstantial thing and it's relative to the times. There was a great deal of slavery all the way to time ago, and it was white people who legally abolished slavery.
Yeah, I know that's something. I'm not. So the thing is, I'm not advocating for or denouncing white people. I just want to be very clear on this, but it's very important not to judge a society by where they are, how developed they are, because a lot of times the lack of development is directly as a result of the behaviour of more developed countries. Some developed countries prey on,
definitely,
as well as lift up.
This can definitely be a contributor to why they don't get any further. But as I said, we all started off the same way. So why do we develop at different rates?
In what way, though?
Well, I mean, we were all from Earth. No one was given an advantage over anyone else.
Yeah,
you believe in
so there's different.
You know, Aboriginal people, for example, existed in this land unbothered, untouched for. I think there's evidence that suggests 50,000 years, or it might be greater. I'm not sure. Yeah. So why then did the British come so much more developed than the Aboriginals, if we're all equal?
No, but the British were already developed in Britain. So I'll
sure, you know, in much shorter time than 50,000 years.
Okay, so I want to jump back to what we were saying, because this is relevant. When we were talking about the White Australia policy, before you said the White Australia policy was that restrictive act, it actually wasn't. So the White Australia policy, it was.
What I said, it was called the Immigration Restriction Act.
Yeah, no, but that's not the White Australia policy. So the White Australia policy is a set of acts and laws that over, like, all of it. It wasn't just that one act. It was all the different laws and rules that furthered the interests of the British and at the expense of others. So if you were non-British, British people had migration preference above all.
If you formed a new nation, meaning like if you called yourself this new nation group and you're in new land, wouldn't you make laws to protect yourself and your land?
Kind of, but not really. So as I said, there was so there were like tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of Chinese people. They were building this nation as well.
As I said, we touched on this subject briefly before. And as I said, the Immigration Restriction Act, the main aspect of it was a language test. And if you couldn't speak a European language of the tester's choice, you couldn't come into the country. It was. Yeah.
Oh, so you're talking about they weren't trying to build it, is what you're saying?
Basically, that's what the act was about, and the policy, as you say. Yeah. It was mostly about preventing Chinese exploitation. As I said, Chinese are
very quickly today, so I wasn't fully taking it in.
Like I said, it was specifically about keeping Chinese people from exploiting Australian resources. And if you don't enact certain laws to stop them doing that, they do it.
What I saw was after the first restrictive thing, there was also the second aspect, which was there was wealthy landowners which were trying to undercut the local workers, and then there was this idea that Australia was the best land for workers because the workers, like, they started unions and they got guaranteed the 8-hour workday. They internationally, people were like, wow, like, how do they get all these benefits? And Australia unionised hard, so this is like some ALP stuff that they just did.
Back when the Labor Party was actually
No, and they got a lot of rights for the workers. And then they were trying to prevent the landowners, from just taking in what you called indentured workers, so like slaves basically, from the Pacific. So apparently they were going to the Fiji and stuff like that, getting people, and they had these like debt bonds, and they would come here as effectively slaves. So if you work for 10 years, you can become free, and some of them, after that point, you're given a house and allowed to live. So it was like a slavery, but it wasn't a sort of like, I'm stealing you and...
I'd work for 10 years if someone gave me a house.
No, but the thing is, like, they effectively had them on these completely unfair contracts. And what was the good thing about, this is my understanding, is the unionised people were like, stuff this, they're undercutting our wages. So this was all basically, this all happened because of white landowners were trying to undercut the white workers. And
oh, yeah, I understand what you're saying there.
Yeah, so it's not like some sort of... It's so weird that all the key players are white people.
Generally, but the ones you hear about mostly. But this is what you're talking about now is kind of like the proletariat versus the bourgeoisie.
Yeah, so it's a classism thing, and this is where I end up coming into this. So this is where my views are, where I don't think that we should have this nationalism and racism type stuff, because I think that the real problem is, to quote Immortal Technique, is classism. So when you like
I wish that were the case.
No, but it's probably more across that privilege discussion. When people talk about white privilege and all this sort of stuff, and I say, if you talk about white privilege and you believe in white privilege, then you clearly dismiss the people who are white who live in very unprivileged conditions.
Well, the people who conceived of white privilege and who talk about it are generally projecting, because these are the most privileged white people in the country. We're talking about leftist academics and champagne socialists from the universities. But white privilege...
I think classism is the issue.
Oh, okay, well, classism... I wish it was the issue. You can see that the communists advanced themselves much more successfully when they used classism as an issue in countries that were majority white. When the reason the leftists and the sort of pseudo communists or whatever modern versions of communists, as they're called cultural Marxists sometimes, we understand them as leftists. They go for the race thing now and the race divide thing. They're all about racism. They don't talk about classism anymore because they see there's enough different people living in Australia and in European countries to successfully use race as the dividing factor.
I don't think it's always race though. So, like, recently what I've started seeing is it'll be like, oh, Marvel wanted to get a superhero, but they got a lesbian this time, but they didn't have a disabled transgender hero. And you'll just be like, just give it a break, just let them be, you know what I mean? So
that's just
they're all going with this intersectional thing. So I think that the mad communists, leftists, blah, blah, they're focusing on that intersectional rubbish. So anyone who feels disaffected, join us. So it's like they'll start off in America. It seems like they'll try and get the blacks in there, then they'll get the transsexuals in there, they'll get lesbians in there. Sorry if anyone's offended by me free speaking on this. If you are, who cares? Like your opinion doesn't matter. Let's be serious.
It's what they call social justice.
Yeah,
now, social justice, in essence, is a good thing. Social justice just simply means helping up the poor or the oppressed.
Yeah.
Which actually, as I explained before, is a term or a philosophy that is prevalent only in majority white countries. You won't find it anywhere else, funnily enough. So
there's social justice elements in a lot.
Yeah, but it's not prevalent and it's not ruling the society anywhere but in white countries.
Okay, if there was something I'd criticise you on, it seems you're so
show me where
so dismissive of other cultures. And I'm not trying to be...
Other cultures aren't my business.
Yeah, of course. That's what I mean. So,
but
if I think that this is an opinion,
I'll just finish my point.
Yeah.
Can you name one country other than a majority white country which has prevalent in social structure, feminism, gay rights, same-sex marriage vote, that has any of these concepts which are tied to social justice?
So not in the gay rights, but for example, the culture that West Africa, the Shanji culture, Akan culture, they have like I was talking to my dad about it recently, and I'm not the best to explain it, but they have wealth through the family passed down through your mother's generation and not through the father. And it's like a way of redistributing family assets.
Would it be because the women are more responsible?
I think it's just I can't remember. I don't want to discuss it. So I don't understand it well enough.
It's certainly not an example of Western type current feminism.
No. But what I mean is all these really interesting social structures and things that other cultures have. That if you aren't going to put in the time to actually learn about these cultures, you're not going to see it. So that's, if I was to have a criticism of the approach that you have, is in all your sort of fanboyism of Western culture, and I'm a fanboy of Western culture myself, if you're not actively trying to learn about other cultures, you're not going to see the good stuff about them. It's just not going to be in your
you were just trying to describe an aspect of your own culture, but you couldn't because you didn't know enough about it.
Yeah, no. It's still I'll accept that.
But what I was getting at with that was, if you wanted to, for example, advance the cause of social justice as you understand it today, and you take into consideration that nowhere is this extreme, intense version of social justice that we see today as prevalent as it is
in the West.
In the West, and it is, you don't see it anywhere else. Majority white countries, that's where the social justice activism is. Okay, so if you wanted to advance it as a philosophy, then it's probably in your interests to advance the white race and preserve it. No, because as the white race disappears,
it's probably like
so
a
does social
Maslow's
justice.
thing, though. So like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's basically like once you have shelter, then you can focus on food. Once you've got food, you focus on relationships. Once you've got relationships, then you can focus on, it finally finishes with self-actualization, becoming your best version of yourself.
Let's just bring it back to the original question. What is nationalism in Australia, and who qualifies to be an Australian? And does it consist of preservation, race preservation, and how do you feel about that as a black person?
I love how you threw that part into the question. As a black person, I'll let Blair go on this one.
You guys have your final thoughts, and then we'll take.
Well, my standpoint on nationalism stands, and it's really quite simple. A country is a geographical area, a landmass. A nation is a people, and to be more literal, a race of people, which is exclusive. The culture that the people creates is a result of the exclusive and intrinsic racial qualities, which is why when you change people or nation, you change the culture. I think if we are to regard Australia, the nation, as just nothing but a landmass, then Australia no longer exists. It's a mere stopover place for tourists and to be exploited by international money powers for their own gain, which they're currently doing anyway. Basically, right now, the country you're living in is called Australia, but you're not living in Australian culture. Australian culture died 15 to 20 years ago. What we're living in now is a globalized culture, which is really just the result of an expansion of a global money system or a global money machine. No longer are white people really permitted to even recognize themselves as members of an ethnic identity. We are supposed to give up our identity. We're supposed to embrace anyone and everyone, and thereby we become no one.
So what is Australia right now?
Australia right now, basically, and unfortunately, is what I just described, a mere stopover place for tourists and an opportunity for international capital for exploitation, regardless of what happens to the working class Australian.
Stop on this very specifically. If that's how you describe Australia, then how can you have any sense of pride? Because
my pride is ethnic, it's not geographical. I'm proud of who I am ethnically and where I come from, as in the people that I come from.
So you're not proud of Australia, the country, this area?
The state that my country's in now, certainly I'm not proud
of.
And
the culture?
The culture, there are traces of what we once were as a people in our country.
Okay.
We can see them in the ability to actually live in a timber-framed house with a pitch roof and all these electrical and plumbing services. Like how, there are elements and figments still remaining, but the community, the sense of community, and the character, the spirit of what it once meant to be Australia is no longer there. And I know that everybody watching this who has lived in Australia for at least one or two, or who comes from a family that's been here for one or two generations, will understand what I mean when they say, when I say that personally I've seen the area I grew up in transform, and it's basically no longer recognizable. People are angry, people are stressed, people have no time, and slowly but surely the people are being replaced ethnically by immigrants. And this is happening all around Australia, and no one can argue that it's not. And as also, I'll finish my point by stating that it's actually I don't see you as an enemy. Not at all.
No,
I don't actually hate anyone. I've been very clear about that since the beginning of my political activity. Actually, if you were to right now say, I'm going to stand up and I want to create a new culture. I want to protect the people in this country who created this country, then I'd call you my brother. We'd fight alongside each other. But I do still see myself as a member of an exclusive ethnic collective, and the people that I hail from are responsible for the civilization we live in here in Australia. They're responsible for the creation of Australia. And basically that's it. It's quite a simple concept.
If I was breaking down what you've just said, I would say my understanding is it's actually a footballer who said this, because like I don't fight these people because I hate them. I fight these people because I love the people who are behind me. So that's my understanding of what you're putting forward, is that you see yourself as a representative of some sort of white Australia type thing, and your passions are in advocacy of what that is, and not because you hate immigrants or something. Is that a fair thing, or is that sort of not really?
It's reasonable because, and I don't see why it's such a horrible thing to say that you're representative of white people. It's associated with racism and hate. Why? We have representatives from the Muslim community and the African community. And the Chinese community.
I think.
But then, if someone says I'm representing the white community, they're called a racist.
No. So
why is that?
My understanding of that is because of what's they called, institutionalized racism or something like that. There's like people view it as because white people are generally
There's definitely an
benefited from stuff.
There's definitely an institutional racism. However, it's not in the favour of white people.
Oh yeah, no.
And if anyone
my
says
understanding of this whole racism thing, it comes up a lot on American sort of like SJW things where they go, I can't be racist because I'm black, and you have these people who believe that you can't be racist unless you're because I can't remember the argument, but it's rubbish. Basically rubbish. Basically talks about the institutionalized racism and how everything goes against black people or everything's pro-white people, therefore black people can't be racist and white people are always racist or some rubbish like that. I find it ridiculous.
I think the reverse is the case. In all
Anyway, so, but in Australia, as it is right now...
Sorry, I just said it a slow. Which one is Blair? They look exactly the same because I'm not racist.
Is that Erickson?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was trying to work out as soon as I've seen that before. Jesus Louises. Okay, so your view is, and sorry if I keep trying to get back to it, I just want to really nut this out. So I'm not verbaling you on anything like this.
Sure.
You're pro, you want to advocate for effectively a white Australia policy because you believe by, it's almost as though if you're going to keep making a soup, you've got to have the ingredients right, and you believe that for Australia, say Australia was a soup going forward, if the ingredients were all different ingredients from what it used to be, you're going to have a different soup. I just made up this little thing on the run, but I'm just trying to, in my head, work out.
It's a peculiar analogy.
Yeah.
I'm not really an advocate for any type of policy. I haven't thought that much about it. All I've done from the beginning is observed this country objectively and then presented my observations to the public, and whether or not they've chosen to listen to me or support me has been entirely up to them.
Yep.
I haven't made any conscientious effort to sell anything to anyone or try to brainwash anyone. Like like I said, I don't even really have opinions. Like this isn't what I'm telling you is not my view. I'm not viewing anything like through any specific lens.
There's clearly, everyone has bias, so you can't pretend
that's,
like I'm just flowing information because you're clearly biased.
Well, nothing's without some level of subjectivity because everyone feels a certain way about something.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
And obviously I feel that white Australians aren't represented, and anyone who tries to represent them is demonised. So,
whoa. No. This is a fresh little topic. White Australians aren't represented.
Not as an ethnic group, no.
How?
Who stands up and says white Australians are in trouble, white Australians need this, or white Australians...
But the majority of say, Parliament is white Australians, so they're
doesn't
enacting
mean they're representing white interests.
No, but you're naturally the self-interest is the guiding line.
Really? You think gender quotas in Parliament is in the interest of white people?
No, not gender quotas. What I'm talking about, there's always going to be self-interest.
You think Sarah Hanson-Young advocating for refugees is stemming from a white self-interest?
The exception, not the rule.
There's a fair few exceptions, believe me.
Okay,
Basically, you can't be in Parliament very long if you do openly advocate for some sort of white beneficial policy.
Your boy Fraser Anning?
Fraser Anning is probably the only one at the moment.
Only one.
Maybe Corey Bernardi, but he hasn't said
Corey
much.
Bernardi, big time?
Maybe, yeah. See,
Really?
we've got disagreements here. But you can't, for example, give me the name of one person who, might represent the white people of Australia.
Stands up and puts it,
in the same way that an African community representative.
Or indigenous, Ken White or whatever his name is.
Correct.
Now I know what
Simply
you mean
because
by
the people in Parliament are white, that by no means they represent white interests.
I'm starting to understand what you mean.
Quite
what
the
you're
opposite.
talking about is you're saying it's toxic to explicitly put your flag on the mast, whatever the saying is, and say I'm all about the white people. That's a completely different.
Well, it's not. You don't have to say. You don't have to be a supremacist. Now, I reject that term. I've been called a white supremacist, and I've never said that. I've never identified with that term.
Yeah.
White separatist, maybe.
Is this in that whole miscegenation or whatever that word it was that I found?
Miscegenation, if anyone doesn't know, means race mixing. That's what it means.
Yeah,
and I believe that is in the interests of global money powers.
Yeah, so you don't believe that white people should mix and procreate with non-whites?
People can do what they want. But,
yeah.
I would recommend I would recommend for them not to do it. I think it's a good idea.
Yep.
I think it will result in a gradual but steady over a generational period, of course, it will result in the emergence of a new people, of a people which is
It's like a beige, like a
people,
weird coloured beige people.
a people which does not stand as sort of in terms of its intellectual and creative capacity as high as we did previously. Because I think that, as I said, I think that races have intrinsic qualities which are in our DNA biologically, and I think that's why when you go to Africa, for example, the average IQ is 65, whereas if you go to China, it's
That is absolutely horseshit.
it is. If you look at the statistics,
Horseshit.
it's true.
It cannot be.
In the 2002
You know why it cannot be?
global inequality statistics.
It cannot be. Do you know why?
Why?
Okay, so there's this
bring it up
problem.
on-
No. So Jordan Peterson talks about this problem where a sub 80 IQ means you can't learn basic stuff. And he goes, what are we going to do with? It's only 10% of people have a sub 80. So if you say the average IQ of people in Africa is 60, you're talking about people who can't even. The military in America won't accept you if your IQ is below 80 because they can't teach you to be consistently. To just be, you can't learn stuff. You basically don't see patterns in anything.
I don't see how that disproves my.
No. So you reckon you go around to Africa and there's people walking around just like can't even see basic patterns.
Well, I'm only reciting what I saw in a Bureau of
It's
Stats.
bullshit. I'll put this to you right now. I'm not gonna.
Do you think there's a link between race and IQ?
Sometimes people get things wrong, so I'm not gonna say that.
Do you think there's a link? Do you personally think there's a link between race and IQ?
Yes.
Okay. Well, that's a start.
That's a start. No. So there's obviously races that are. For example, the Ashkenazi Jews are like just phenomenal. They seem to be getting a lot of stuff done.
They're very intelligent, yeah.
Yeah, so there's obviously an element of nature versus nurture. That does not mean that a black person, if you're saying that they're sub 60 or whatever, that's
you're always going to get exceptions on an individual level. Like right now, like you, I think, are probably more intelligent than the average African person.
Oh, okay.
And that's just an observation. Obviously, that's a subjective opinion. But
I don't take things personally, but that's rubbish. But yeah, continue.
It's
rubbish on all levels. I'm not smarter than the average African.
The IQ itself, the IQ itself is was actually never meant to be a measure of any sort of intelligence, but it's generally accepted to be today anyway.
Patterns.
Yeah, and
The ability to see patterns.
it's used as a measure of intelligence today, even though it was never supposed to be. But the Chinese and Japanese people have, on average, a higher IQ than European people. However, European people are somewhere just below the more developed Asian nations. Yet the European people seem to still produce what is, I think, a community or a culture with a generally higher standard of living. With the exception of Japan, I think Japan's very
next level.
Yeah.
I went to Japan and they're just like super beings.
Yeah. But I think I explained this to a colleague of mine earlier, that intelligence on its own isn't always a good thing. You can use because if you're very smart but you don't believe in anything, then you're only going to use it to advance yourself, and you're going to consume. So intelligence on its own certainly isn't an indicator of an advanced culture.
Of course. But why is it okay? So allow me to flesh this out a bit. You brought up the do I believe that some races are more intelligent than others? I do. It's a controversial thing. Some people don't. I don't really get that much. But it almost seems like you're moving towards some races are more worthy, or some races are fundamentally better because they might track at, say, an average of 95 on IQ instead of 100 or 80 instead of
If we're talking about 95 to 100, that's not much difference.
Yeah. No,
Talking about an average difference of like 30 in between is a pretty big difference.
I can't see that is anywhere though.
Look, I read some stats today, and that's what it suggested. I personally didn't do the test.
Oh yeah,
so
no. I'll go. I'd never like to criticise something before I've actually looked
But
into
it's alright. You acknowledge the point.
ridiculous.
The point I was making was that anyway.
But that's what I want to know is what you're using that, what line of pathway you're going. You trying to suggest that there are people who are fundamentally better than other people.
No, we were talking about miscegenation.
Yeah, of course. Oh, yeah.
And my point was that if you take a member of a race that is, on average, that race on average has a higher IQ than a member of another race that we're going to take as well, and then you, by coercion or force, put them together and breed them. Now, the child that's produced, based on the fusion of the DNA between the two, the intrinsic racial qualities of the two, the child produced is going to be sort of a medium between the two. It's going to stand intellectually and creatively higher than the lower parent in terms of intellectual capacity, but slightly lower than the smarter one. And so what you get if you do that on a large scale is a breakdown of the people. And
so the people who are seen as better,
well, if we do this with millions of people, if we miscegenate millions of people, then what we can see is an actual breakdown of the people themselves in terms of their understanding or their ability to understand and process information and create. Okay, and this I think is in the interests. Yeah, it is radical, but believe me, there are people that think about this a lot.
Yeah,
and it's certainly not. I'm a carpenter from the southeastern suburbs, so it's contrary to what the mainstream media tells the people. I'm not the greatest threat to this country, but I do think about this, but not nearly as much as the people in real positions of power do.
Yeah.
And I believe it's in their best interest to promote this mass miscegenation, to manufacture for themselves a more manageable slave race almost. And I think you can see the results of this if you watch from a collective point of view the Western world.
Stop for a second. So, do you believe that there's actors that are trying to control? So I'll tell you what. I'll contrast my opinion, and I'll see if you agree with this. So I don't think that there's like. I understand that you got like the Rothschild family that owns every central bank apart from the 3 in the world or something. So and central banks are made up of the large banks and stuff. So I understand that there's a Jewish financial system that's kind of being controlled. That's not. I don't see it as an evil cartel. I don't think that there's an evil world government pulling the strings like Illuminati type thing that's behind the scenes. Do you think that there are, say, either at a macro level, like globally, is it macro? Yeah, globally, that there are like people whose goals are to have as much race mixing or something like that happening, or have established goals that go in line with managing the people? Or do you think that this is more at a local level, like we're talking about, our politicians are trying to encourage specific race-related or nation-related? Do you think that if it wasn't happening coordinated?
If it wasn't coordinated, then it would be awfully coincidental that it's happening to all majority white countries in the world at the same time, wouldn't you say?
No, but that kind of happens in general with a lot of things. So, like, I can't remember what it was, but like, say for example, I think the Egyptians discovered the wheel or something, and then on the other side of the world, like less than 5 years later, someone else did it as well.
Maybe they mailed it over there. But I think it's quite clear to me that it's being coordinated deliberately. There's a great effort to incorporate as many messages, not just to encourage miscegenation or to make it seem like a desirable thing, but feminism and transgender and sexual. All of this.
Is that not just what happens when you create fertile ground for people to like
it's help
express themselves in a way?
Well, it's people are helped to do this.
Yeah.
Basically, I would need to explain the subversion of the West in a different video because it's about an hour-long discussion.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
But what I will say now is that what subversion is psychological warfare. It's warfare that's not physical. It's not tanks and helicopters coming in to bomb you. It's information war. It's the ability to change the perception of reality of the people in the country of your enemy while you gain control of its institutions for the purposes of milking it and then destroying it.
Okay.
And it works. It's very effective.
Okay.
But like the warfare that's presented to us in Hollywood movies is the lowest form of warfare in existence. But I'll just finish. Yeah. But it's actually so obvious, the subversion and the warfare practiced against us, the non-violent warfare. It's reached such stage of severity that average people now have a word and term for it. They call it political correctness because they're seeing it for what it is, but they don't necessarily have the information they need to process what it is, who's doing it, and why. I can explain that, and I have explained that in the past, but I can explain it in greater detail. I think that's part of the reason I'm so heavily censored.
One thing, before I came tonight, obviously, I was trying to understand what it's like to be you, and I said this earlier to you, just privately, and I can normally get in the heads of people, so I can normally go, this person's a feminist, they clearly believe that X, Y, and Z. The problem I had with you specifically was there's been so much rubbish said about you that I wasn't actually sure what was real and what wasn't. And that's almost like this Trump effect, not the big note you're going to be the leader of the free world or whatever people you like to call. But I legitimately could not understand what was real and what wasn't, because whenever I saw you, I'd see, obviously, be like, Blair Cottrell, convicted criminal. And it was just like this whole, you could tell that it was lies just by reading at it. But at the same time, I couldn't then, normally what you do is you'd find the liar, read the opposite of that, But I'm not going to sit there and go that, because they're lying about you, that you must be speaking the truth. Because some of the things that you say I find ridiculous. Some of it I find fair, because a lot of what you say, and I think what attracts people to your message, is that you generally start off with, I care about Australia, I care about my people, blah, blah. And that brings on someone like me, because I'm like, oh, okay, so he's just talking about this. And then somewhere down the path you deviate into, but only for white people, or something that will obviously draw the line in the sand and say this.
To be fair, I never said it was just for white people.
No, I'm being just general.
Like I said, I've got no problem with people of different races being in Australia, just so long as it does not threaten the ethnic existence of my own people.
I'm being general. But that's what I found really, really difficult. Was there's a lot said about you. There's a lot, all this sort of stuff. From what I've found from me, you fantastic guy. Not fantastic. I don't want to go on the record saying Blair Cottrell's a fantastic guy, because it kind of tars me.
Don't be misled by my comments.
Uncle Tom.
No, you're just a decent, normal guy with views that I fundamentally will disagree with on a lot of them, because I don't think that foreigners are less. I don't think that having a non-monolithic, so a diverse culture. And also, I also think that it's important, my citizenship, so I'm quite proud of Australia, so it's different. So we have different views of looking at stuff, but at the fundamentals, I can't see this sort of, a lot of people I know who don't know you or whatever, when they comment about you, they go, oh, this guy, oh, there's that racist guy, whatever. People are making comments on you based on what they see on TV, and that's just purely rubbish. The truth is probably somewhere in between them, but it's just ridiculous. For mine, I find part of what you're saying is true in the aspect that there's this politically correct stuff going on. There's sort of that tells everyone that anyone who's from, say, nationalist type movement is racist, is this, that, and the other, and I think that's going to end up being the downfall of a lot of this, because if you listen to the media and then you somehow reach out, well, in the past when you used to have platforms to spread your message, and you don't find this evil person who's trying to kill all foreigners and all this sort of stuff like that, then it's much easier for that person, especially if they're white and think and think and speak like you, it's much easier than for them to attach to your message, because I knew that the person who was denouncing you was lying. So it's much easier than to not listen to media. So that's when I was trying to have an understanding of what you were talking about. That's what really got in my head, which was all the stuff online about you seems to be horrific. So when I turn up and then I meet you, I think this guy just seems like a normal guy, advocating positions that I would not advocate for, but that's life. Some of them, yeah. No, but that's the tricky thing, and that's where I think that your fan base. That's why you have 100 and whatever thousand people, and that was years ago.
That's what you have to understand, is it's the lies spread about me are propaganda, a part of a propaganda effort to defame my character so no one will want to listen to me. Because when you can't come up with good arguments or counterpoints to what a person's saying, and you want to hold on to your little equality worldview power structure, then you need to make that person out to be a horrible person so no one will listen to his message anyway. So then his message doesn't matter, it's only his character that matters. Yeah. So, just my final thought before we wrap it up, I suppose I could have a little question time, whatever we do next. When you believe a lie, for example, world equality, when you put that into the basis of your understanding of the world, when you believe that, well, you end up being, which is the basis of communism essentially, is equality. Well, you end up being a very angry person all the time. Why? Well, because you're going to be presented every day with very obvious examples of why what you believe is a lie. And so the first stage that you'll go through is anger and frustration. Then you'll start either reading stuff or producing your own stuff which intellectualizes your own lie in order to help you believe it. But if you read what the left actually write, they're never actually saying anything. They're just trying to moralize and make themselves appear morally superior than anyone who gives them any problem. And then the problem with this though is the truth is tricky, because when you try to oppress it, when you try to silence it, other people who are interested in the truth or who see that oppression or censorship happening start talking about what the person that was being censored was talking about. And so the truth kind of multiplies in the people who are propagating it. And so what you must then do, the third stage of believing in a lie such as human equality, you need to actually physically suppress and censor people who are advocating for the truth. And your job is never done, because as I said, every time you do censor one person, more people notice. And so every day is going to be slightly more stressful than the last for you if you believe the lie of equality and associate with communism and socialism. But eventually it reaches a point where not only are you incapable of stalking, harassing, blogging about, finding out the personal details of people who actually point out how ridiculous your lie is, that there are too many people for you to do that. Like the people advocating the truth are just too many. And so it reaches a point where you can either just admit that you're believing in a lie, or you can actually organise a mass execution. And it sounds funny when you say it like that, but it's happened many times throughout history in communist states. People have been mass executed.
They do mass executions even today in China. So it's not that.
All these
you have this way of just throwing in some absolutely ridiculous shit.
It's not ridiculous. It's just it's intense.
Yeah. No,
it's intense in normal conversation.
Why did you have to say that?
Well, maybe it's why I'm so controversial.
No, because it's sort of like, okay, I get what he's saying then, this makes sense, and then mass execution right there, you're just like, oh dear.
Well, you'll be surprised. I mean, why is it so necessary to censor and ban people from social media, for example?
I think that's ridiculous.
If what conservative people are saying is just racist nonsense and pig-headed ignorance, then why is it so necessary to censor them all the time? Well, it serves a number of purposes. It prevents them from reaching more people, but it also prevents them from telling you what's happening to them. So it will reach a certain point where majority of political dissidents, which we understand as conservatives or right-wingers, may start to disappear. And because they can't communicate with anybody, then how will anybody ever know about it?
That won't happen in Australia, I don't believe, and I find it very difficult.
I'd hope not, but there's no reason why it can't.
one thing I didn't address earlier was the M-word. Okay, so...
M-word?
Yeah, Muslims. That was one of the four things that I was going to bring up, which was indigenous people, Jews, people like myself, and Muslims, because you seem to go hard against Muslims, and nearly all the Muslims that I've met have been decent people.
So that's your personal experience. That doesn't change.
That's all right.
I like how you interject, like, the Kwaku, trust me, those Muslims are bad people.
No, I didn't say that.
No, I know, I'm not going to verbal you, dear. Sorry. But when I broke this out of my head, I went, why are they targeting Muslims, right? And when I tried to structure this in my head, when you target Muslims, and this might seem a bit leftist of me, even though I'm not a leftist, what you are targeting is the visible Muslims. So you're targeting either the Bible Belt, not Bible bashing, but the ones Quran, the full get up, or you're targeting the women and children, because they're the only ones that are visible. Your typical, I'm a lawyer named Muhammad Hussein, you know what I mean, that goes to work normally. He just looks like, say, a typical Paki or a typical, sorry if that's offensive, I couldn't give a rat's, but he just looks like a typical, say even Sudanese, because a lot of Sudanese people are Muslim or Somalian or whatever. But when people talk about Muslims and say these Muslims are this, that and the other, I started thinking of this. I started thinking this would be most difficult for, say, like an 8-year-old girl dressed up in a hijabi get-up going to work. And this is just me being a genuine person. This isn't me trying to work or whatever.
Living in a country that's...
And I started saying that would suck for that person.
Well, choosing to live and raise your children in a country which is majority populated by people who are ethnically different to you is a big decision, and it's going to be difficult for you no matter how you slice it. But first of all, I've never actually gone that hard on Muslims. I've been called anti-Islam by the media, but...
You're the poster boy for anti-Islam, let's be serious, man.
Well, that's the result of mainstream media propaganda, not
the whole them go thing. That's where I based... That's probably the start of me basing my views on this.
The fake beheading. Well, that was an idea of my colleague, and the aim was to promote a rally, and I thought it was controversial enough to do that.
I'm just talking about, so I look at why did I think
I'm not
making an anti-Islam person? It starts off with that.
I'm certainly not making excuses, but what I'm saying is I've known plenty of Muslims throughout my life as well. predominantly Bosnians, which are the Eastern European Muslims.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've found them to be excellent people as well, but it certainly doesn't change my perspective
On the whole
collective.
But
You can't say I have a friend from Sudan.
Yeah, of course.
And so all of
I'm
the
not
40
racist.
million
I know some black people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I get that. I've heard that argument. Oh, I know some gay people, so you're not even dropping like no homo. You're
It's
like
like,
just
yeah,
saying
like,
what you're.
it's like my friend's cousin's brother is gay,
get
and
that.
so that's why gay people should teach
I was
my
trying to work
3-year-olds.
out why I have a problem with people who go hard against Muslims, and I really reflected on this. And my issue was that because it targeted the women and children, it didn't actually target the men. You're either targeting like the really hardcore, like I've said this, the people who are Quran bashers, whatever, who are just like, you know.
I would say that
but they're really visible, the women,
I would say that
in their hijabs. So
sure.
yeah,
I would say that whatever I've said about Islam really does not compare in terms of the effect it has on women and children than what is currently still being done to my people in this country and how it's affecting the women and my women and children, or the women and children of my people. I think the children.
Go back a step. Expand on that. I don't. I'm not following.
Well, I think the mainstream media.
Yep.
It's government affiliates, the academics in the education institutions, and anybody else in these fake little committees that they call social justice groups, which is working actively every day to deny white people an exclusive ethnic identity, to blame them for every atrocity in the past and say that they're racist and that they're guilty of this. I think that propaganda system is having a greater effect on the women and children in this country than anything I've ever said about Islam.
I'm maybe not what you said about Islam, but I'm talking to Islamophobia in general. That's probably what I have a problem with. So I'll openly bash ideas that I don't agree with. But
I thought you were about to say anyone then. My man.
No, but let's be serious. I started trying to realize what I was really uncomfortable with. And I always resort to the vulnerable. And it seems to me that when people are like, yeah, F Islam stuff, that
it's for this exact reason that I've rejected accelerationism, which is what the Christchurch shooter Brenton Tarrant was all about. Accelerationism is to help a collapse help a collapse happen faster.
Yeah.
He believes that, like the Christchurch shooter, for example, he's one of those people who believes that everything's going to go to chaos.
I read his book and I watched the massacre.
Yeah,
I try to get as much information. He's all over the place.
I have family members who are young and who are women, and so I actually think about women and children, which is why I reject accelerationism, because a full-scale collapse and lawlessness is not going to be some sort of romantic revolutionary struggle where the working class rise up and overthrow the rich. It's going to be home invasions, rape, ambush by superior numbers and in the middle of the night. It's going to be absolutely relentless violence that no one is prepared for.
Stop for a second. And then finally, the last thing that I had with the M word, there was 2 key points I wrote down. The other one was,
Nationalism, though.
it kind of is.
Okay.
It kind of is.
Okay.
There's only 600,000 Muslims in Australia, so they only make up like 3% of society.
If you believe the stats.
Ooh!
It's under 3%, but if it gets up
If you believe the stats, you got some secret stats that I'm unaware of.
Oh no, I just wouldn't trust anything the government tells
So
me.
people are not saying they're Muslims when they fill out their census data and stuff like that.
It's possible, and it's also possible the government's directly lying to
bigger,
you.
or maybe, I don't know. Okay, anyway, back to nationalism.
back to nationalism, wrap it up, and I'm going to move into the frame in just a sec.
Okay, so I'm actually intrigued by what Blair said today. I still will fundamentally hold the same view. I wasn't. You won't be surprised that I haven't been changed in my views.
I don't expect anyone to change in a day. But it took me 2 years. So.
I fundamentally believe that I'm actually quite proud of being Australian. You might probably see it as like because I've taken some whiteness or something. I don't know what it is. I think that modern day Australia is very fantastic. I love the form of government. So I
should have seen it 20 years ago.
It's still the same. Yeah. So I wouldn't. What I found I'd be critical of what you've suggested today is that not being proud of being Australian. I'm not sure you said, I don't want to verbal you because that's quite a thing to say, but you said that you weren't proud, you're more proud of your nation identity than you were of
the country.
I just because it's a personal thing. I don't want to verbal you. That's why I'm being very specific.
I have no allegiance to the current government system whatsoever, other than what the amount of allegiance which is legally required of me. For example, pay taxes. But I don't subscribe to it. The whole media system is a rat's nest of cowards and liars. And that I'm very ashamed of. If someone viewed I'm actually very embarrassed by it. And I think it was Malaysia. A Malaysian representative for the government there said that Australian Parliament is like fantastic theatre or something. And I agree. It's so fantastic. It's ridiculous. And I'm embarrassed the current state my country's in. However, I do still love my country, and my pride stems more from my nation, which is my people and my ethnic collective.
From the white history.
Yeah.
And
essentially,
the whiteness of the culture.
Yeah. When I have children, I want my children to be white because I think it's beautiful. Like I think I'm proud of the way I look, and I want my children to look like me. That's essentially where my philosophy goes.
Okay. Yeah. Mine is more mainstream than that, obviously. So I
It's not like I said.
But then again, it would be difficult for me to subscribe to your view, because that wouldn't your view of first of all, there isn't a black history
you don't always
of
have to,
Australia.
Yeah, sure.
Let's be serious. So
but you don't necessarily have to subscribe to my view. You should. You just acknowledge it and you say, okay, I don't see how it's such a bad thing.
I don't see. I don't see what you've told me as being problematic, but I'm sure behind it there's a lot of another thing that I realised when I was thinking about what it was like to be Blair, I realised there's a lot of people, problematic people in the right-wing movement. There's a lot of people who have very much more extreme views than yours. Well, you suggested yours even extreme in the first place.
What separates them from me is it's a simple lack of emotional control.
Yeah.
And just they allow their egotistical or emotional side to take hold of them.
Yeah, like they met a black person one day who robbed them or something.
Yeah, and they develop a prejudice, and they feel it's necessary to express anger or the rage that they feel as a result of that incident, for example, on someone else. That I've never been that way. I've been able to express myself articulately and patiently, and as a result, you're never going to get any hatred from me, as for example, I don't actually hate anyone.
Yeah.
I hate lies. I hate philosophies and ideologies which threaten what Australian people are working, majority of working Australian people, the people in my country.
Yep.
But I don't hate any people specifically, and I think that's what every man should aspire to.
I'd say the Indigenous people would have a different point of view, that you don't hate them. Not that because you have a hatred for them, but to be so dismissive of Indigenous people with all that.
Well, they're not my responsibility.
I get that. But I'd say that to deny Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander person nationhood, or
I'm not denying them anything,
or just the ability to call this their country. I find that there'll be a slight
they can call it their country if they wish, and they can live exclusively from us if they wish.
Yeah.
They'll have to go out into the bush.
You just don't want them to be included.
No, they can choose to live with us if they want, but and they do choose to live with us.
Yeah, no. I'm trying to understand it because.
But if they want nationhood, then they need exclusivity in order to claim it. You can't claim nationhood. We can, but you'll have to live separately within the nation itself.
So this is not their nation.
What is what? I'm not their nation.
No. Australia, the land that we live in, is not a nation for Aboriginals.
Well, the land's not a nation. The land's a country.
You know what I mean.
The country, sure, they've lived in the country for a long time.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's parts of the country that still are very much theirs.
Because they're there. We're here now.
Well, I think there's some land rights act where land's given back to them in various areas.
Yeah, Vincent Lanyari.
Yeah, but no one. There's a saying that no one can give you power. You have to take it.
Yeah,
okay,
I agree.
And a living space that's untampered with, that's left for you, is something powerful. And if you want that, you need to take it. And my advice to the Aboriginal people is, well, if you've got such animosity towards the white Australian people,
I don't think that. I just think fundamentally.
But even if they wanted the country back for themselves, take it. And if you can't take it,
I think that fundamentally it's where I would actually feel for them in a way, because I feel that the way we talk about Aboriginal people, it's kind of like going to someone's house, taking everything and being like, sorry, we're taking over, we're under new management now. That's kind of what you're saying, like, you can think it, right? But when we go live on things like this, I kind of feel uncomfortable in a way, because I definitely want to say, that's what you're about.
But if you want,
I don't agree with that at all.
If that was you, right? If someone came into your house and started taking your stuff,
yep,
what would you do? Would you let them do it?
It's tough. Sometimes you got to.
Really?
Let's be serious. Like, if you know,
the only reason why they have to is
people with guns came to my house and took everything, and what was it? Took my kids and what was that?
But you might have your own gun. If you had it, would you use it to defend yourself and your property?
Of course.
There you go.
But failing to have really taken the ascendancy of the land of Australia and this nation, or we'll get the semantics out of it. This is somewhere where I'm fundamentally believing that I believe that the land is for the Aboriginal people, and they were here first. No, I believe it's for everyone right now.
Do you believe it belongs to the Aboriginal people?
It's something I've got to think a lot about. I believe that it doesn't belong to them now, because obviously everyone's taken it.
Everyone move down.
Okay.
Just think about my final statement on that would just be, think about what designates land as belonging to any certain people or group. Is it just the time spent there? Is it the ability to fight for it and protect it? Is it the ability to take it?
The ability to claim it in a way. I don't think they've been able to claim it as they would. Yeah, that's kind of off topic.
Well, do they deserve it then?
I don't know.
Something to think about.
Yeah. What up? Oh, yeah.
Alright. So, I think the discussion did go a little bit in circles. I probably should have moderated it a little more.
Yeah.
You do like your tangents, Kwaku?
Yeah, well, thanks for not moderating us, dear.
Well,
I blame you entirely for letting me take too much of control.
I did try, and then people in the comments told me to be quiet. So I'm gonna...
People in the comments told me to be quiet.
They do realise that there's so many trolls in the comments.
Oh yeah, I know. One of the super chats says, is Blair Nazbol gang or helicopter gang? I don't even know what that means.
What would you say, Stu?
Helicopter?
I hope so, yeah.
One of the super chats asked, helicopter?
Yeah, trying to avoid Nazbol, though it is tempting.
Okay. I don't know what that means.
It's sort of like, it's shortened abbreviation type words for certain political ideologies.
Oh, I get it. Okay. Another one was written earlier. Who invented the stick? Yeah.
What is that? Is that like a troll?
that was Neil.
Who invented this?
It's a super chat, so it has to be read out.
I have to read out super chats. So if I have to. I'm not allowed to not read them out.
Okay.
But anyway.
Absolute rubbish question. You're better than that, Erickson.
And also,
God invented this.
people are frustrated that you've eaten.
People are frustrated that I've eaten.
Yeah, they think it's rude.
I don't care. Ooh.
So ultimately, what I got out of that was that Blair isn't against, and you can clarify my conclusion, but I felt Blair isn't against having people like you in the country at all, so long as the white majority pertains.
If I was to
Go ahead.
continue with that, I think that from what I've taken, and hopefully this will be a sign that he's explained himself well, that as long as other groups or nationhoods or whatever don't clash with his interests, that he's comfortable for them to exist. It's kind of old school in a way that a lot of international groups would have. Like, say in Africa, if I wanted to turn up and live in Ghana, and I wasn't Ghanaian obviously, then I'd probably think that they would have me as long as I didn't clash with their right to exist. And go like that, and I'd say that's probably what you're trying to say. Is that fair or not?
Is that fair?
If I was to repeat what I actually said, I said that I didn't have problems with people of different races being in Australia, just so long as my own ethnic group was not threatened with total ethnic replacement. On a global scale, definitely, that's correct. I don't have any other problem with the existence of any other race of people in the world, just so long as they're not trying to undermine my existence.
And what is your overall? So from I think what I got out of what you're saying,
Well, I'm pretty mainstream, so
yeah, you don't agree with.
I subscribe to most of what's already occurring. I still think that we need to tip our hat to Indigenous cultures a bit more because they were here first, and without, I just don't think that they're represented as well. I think they're kind of forgotten in a way, but that's.
I don't think
a
that's
personal
true,
thing.
but fair enough.
Yeah, each to their own. I just think that, apart from the odd, if you go to like Queensland, there's like Indurapilly or some, clearly indigenous sounding names of places, and if you sort of like, I'd like to, in Parliament or something, they'd reference the local people or the local indigenous people. Apart from that, sort of. I'd say it's kind of cynical in a way. I still think that there should be more, there should be strong, more prominent in Australia culture.
Fair enough. Neil Erickson wants Blair to know that he loves you.
Don't read the same comment from the same person if it's just trolling.
Someone wrote Blair planning to burn any more garages. Sorry, it's a super chat.
Ooh, what's that?
No, but what's that person's name?
The Soros Foundation.
I kind of guessed they wouldn't be using their real name.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, if anyone doesn't have any more super chats, I'll just let everyone know that next week my live stream has the Dusty Bogan. He'll be on at 8:15. I'm assuming he's watching. Anyone have any more super chats? Otherwise, we're going.
It wasn't bad.
Yeah. All right. Bye, guys. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you guys liked it.
Cheers. Mate, we offline.